Have you ever gone out of your way to do something special for someone you love, only for them to throw it all away with a single decision? That's exactly what happened to me tonight. I decided to surprise my husband with one of his favorite home-cooked meals. I took time off work, did all the shopping, cooked with care, only to watch him walk out the door the moment his mom called. And why? Because she claimed to be cooking something even better. That's not the first time she's done this, either. Every night, like clockwork, she calls to compare dinners, hers versus mine. But this time, I'd had enough. What followed might make you wonder who really crossed a line: the mom who manipulates, the husband who ditches, or the wife who finally snapped. You decide, but let me tell you exactly how it all went down. You see, this wasn't just a one-time thing. My mother-in-law has made it a daily routine to insert herself into our evenings, and it all starts with a phone call. Every single night, like clockwork, she calls around dinner time to ask what we're having. At first, I thought it was just casual small talk, a mom being curious about her son's meals. But I quickly realized it was anything but innocent. She uses that question as a way to compete with me, like dinner is some kind of twisted battleground. If I say we're ordering takeout, she laughs or makes some snide comment about how nothing beats a home-cooked meal. If I say I'm cooking, she suddenly starts bragging about what she's cooking. Always something fancier. Always something that just happens to be one of my husband's favorites. I've heard her say things like, "Oh, I'm making that beef stew you loved so much when you were little." Or, "I'm making that roasted chicken with the garlic lemon sauce you used to beg for." The message is always clear. Her meals are better. Her love is better. Her home is better. At first, I tried not to let it get to me. I mean, she's his mother. Of course, there's going to be some emotional attachment there. I get that. I really do. But when the phone calls turn into invitations, and those invitations turn into disappearances, that's when things started to break me down. My husband would ask me to cook dinner, sometimes even request specific meals, only to suddenly decide, minutes before we were about to eat, that he was going to his mom's instead. He wouldn't even try to hide it. "She's making that lasagna," he'd say. Or, "She just made fresh bread and wants me to come by for a quick bite." And just like that, he'd grab his keys and leave. There were nights I sat at the table alone, looking at 2 full plates, wondering what I did wrong. Nights where I stared at a warm meal, getting cold, wishing I hadn't bothered. It's not just the food, it's the effort, the time, the emotional energy. I was trying to build a life with someone who kept choosing his mom's kitchen over our home. And she knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't just cooking, she was competing. Her goal wasn't to feed him, it was to win. And the sad part? She often did. It started to feel like I was losing my husband not to another woman, but to a woman who already had him under her thumb long before I came into the picture. It's frustrating when your marriage starts to feel like a 3-person relationship. And when the third person has a frying pan in one hand and a guilt trip in the other, trust me, it gets old fast. I began to wonder how long I could keep playing this game before something had to give. And that brings us to the night I finally broke. After so many nights of being left behind, I told myself I wasn't going to let it happen again, at least not without putting up a fight. I wanted to remind my husband that I was his partner now, not his mom. So I decided to do something special. That morning, I woke up earlier than usual and started planning. I had a packed work schedule, but I shuffled things around, cleared a few hours, and made time to cook. Not just any meal, his favorite. The one he always asked for, but rarely got because it took real effort. I went grocery shopping on my lunch break, carefully picking out everything I'd need. I even looked up tips on how to make it exactly how he liked it. Seasoned just right, slow-cooked, tender. I was determined to show him that his favorite comfort food didn't only come from his mother's kitchen. By the time he got home, the house smelled amazing. I was setting the table with that quiet little hope in my chest, the kind that feels like maybe, just maybe, this would be the night things were different. I imagined us sitting down together, laughing, reconnecting over a warm meal I made with love. I even poured his drink and lit a candle, just to make it feel a little more special. And then the phone rang. I didn't even have to ask who it was. I knew. I could feel the mood shift the second he picked it up. I told him gently that he didn't have to answer, that this night could be just for us. But he did anyway, like always. I stood there, frozen, listening to him tell her what we were having. And then I heard it, that tone in her voice, that carefully played surprise, like she couldn't believe I had actually made something nice, like it was somehow unthinkable that I could cook a decent meal. And then, right on cue, she said it. She had cooked something, too. A different dish, one he loved even more. I watched the expression on his face change. A little smirk, a slight nod. And then he said it. Okay, I'll come by. Just like that. He started changing clothes like it was the most normal thing in the world, completely ignoring everything I had done to make the evening special. I asked him seriously, and without even looking at me, he said, "No offense, but what my mom made is even more of a favorite than this." I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just stood there, holding back the weight of 100 tiny heartbreaks. He grabbed his keys and walked out the door like it meant nothing, like I meant nothing. That's when something in me started to harden. I had tried to be understanding, patient, even forgiving. But that night, as I sat down to eat alone again, I realized just how deep the disrespect had gone. And that's when I made a decision I didn't even see coming. A small act, but one that would turn everything upside down. The moment the front door closed behind him, the silence in the house felt louder than ever. I sat at the table, staring at the empty chair across from me, still trying to process what had just happened. All that effort, all that hope, just tossed aside because his mother dangled a plate in front of him. Again, I didn't even want to eat at first. I wasn't hungry anymore, not for food. At least, I was hungry for respect, for partnership, for something that made me feel like I wasn't just some placeholder in his life. But the meal was right there, hot and ready, and I wasn't about to let it all go to waste. So I sat down alone and ate my portion in silence. I didn't even turn on the TV or play music to fill the quiet. I just chewed slowly, every bite heavier than the last. When I finished, I looked over at his plate, still full, untouched, waiting for someone who didn't care enough to stay. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. I thought about all the nights I'd cooked, waited, and ended up eating by myself. I thought about all the times he chose her over me like it was no big deal. I thought about how easy it was for him to walk away, how little he seemed to value my time, my energy, or my feelings. So I picked up his plate and walked straight to the trash can. I didn't even hesitate. I tilted the plate and watched it all slide off, each spoonful hitting the bottom with a dull thud that felt oddly satisfying. It wasn't about the food. It was about finally standing up for myself in the smallest way I could. A silent protest, a quiet scream, a message he wouldn't hear until it was too late. I rinsed my own plate, loaded the dishwasher, and went upstairs. I didn't text him. I didn't ask when he'd be home. I just let him go. It was almost an hour later when the front door creaked open. I heard his footsteps, heavier than usual, and then the sound of him walking into the kitchen. "She lied," he said, his voice filled with frustration. I didn't answer. He walked into the dining room and saw the empty table. She didn't even cook what she said she was making. She just wanted me over there. He sat down and looked at me, clearly expecting me to jump up and reheat his dinner like everything was fine. "Can you warm it up?" he asked. That was when I told him, calmly, clearly, "There's nothing left to reheat." I threw it out. He blinked like he didn't understand the words. "What? Are you serious?" I nodded. "You walked out like it didn't matter." So I made the choice not to save it. That's when the yelling started. He called me petty, said I was horrible, said what I did was worse than what his mom had done. He stomped upstairs, slamming the bedroom door like a child who didn't get his way. And for once, I didn't feel guilty. I felt tired, but also a little stronger. He didn't come back downstairs that night. Not a single word. No apology. No recognition of how hurtful it was to be ditched mid-dinner, like I was an afterthought. Just silence, thick and cold, filling the house like a fog. I tried to relax, but my mind kept playing the night on a loop. Him choosing her again, the trash can lid clanking shut, the way he acted like I was a villain for not saving his plate. The next morning was no better. He avoided eye contact, barely spoke, just grabbed his things and left for work without even goodbye. And honestly, I didn't chase after him. I didn't send a "have a good day" text or try to smooth things over like I usually did. I was done cushioning his ego every time he let me down. But when he came home that evening, it was like a storm came with him. He walked in with that tight jaw, that forced calm people use right before they explode. I was in the kitchen, scrolling through my phone, pretending not to notice. He stood there for a second, like he was waiting for me to speak first. I didn't. So he finally said, "We're just throwing food away now." I looked up slowly. "We're just walking out on dinner now." He scoffed like I was being dramatic. "You could have just saved it. You knew I'd be back." "No, I didn't," I said, keeping my tone even, "because every other time, you've stayed at your mom's without a second thought. You made it clear her dinner was more important than mine." His face twisted like he couldn't believe I had the nerve to call it out. "This isn't about my mom. This is about you being spiteful." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe he actually believed that. "Spiteful? You left. You didn't even look back. You didn't say thank you. You didn't care that I spent hours cooking. You cared more about not offending your mom than hurting your wife." He started raising his voice again, calling me petty, selfish, overreacting. But the louder he got, the calmer I became. I had spent too long second-guessing myself, bending over backwards to keep the peace. This time, I wasn't going to back down. "I'm not your mom," I said quietly, "and I shouldn't have to compete with her every night just to feel seen. I don't want to be part of this tug-of-war anymore." That shut him up for a moment. He just stared at me, stunned, maybe because I wasn't crying, maybe because I finally sounded done. He mumbled something under his breath and went upstairs again, leaving behind a silence that didn't feel quite as heavy as before. This time, I didn't follow. I didn't apologize. I didn't ask if he wanted dinner, because this time, I wasn't going to chase someone who clearly didn't value what I gave. And deep down, I knew something had shifted. I wasn't sure what came next, but I knew I wouldn't keep living like this. The silence between us stretched on for days. No late-night talks. No casual touches. No efforts to make things feel normal again. And honestly, I didn't mind the quiet. It gave me space to think. Something I hadn't really done in a while. For too long, I'd been caught in this cycle of trying to please him, trying to win his attention from someone who never had to earn it. But that night changed something in me. At first, I kept wondering if I had gone too far. I mean, it was just a plate of food, right? Was it really worth all this tension? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it wasn't about the food. It never was. It was about years of small sacrifices, ignored effort, and one-sided compromise. It was about me slowly disappearing while his mother held a dinner plate in one hand and control in the other. I started replaying all those nights I cooked and waited, only to be left behind. The nights I swallowed my frustration, smiled, and said, "It's fine, maybe next time." The way his mom used food as bait, knowing exactly how to pull his strings, and the way he let her. I used to think setting boundaries would make me seem difficult, that saying no would make me the bad guy. But what I've learned is that constantly letting things slide doesn't make you easygoing. It makes you invisible. And I'm tired of being invisible in my own marriage. That's why I decided I'm done tiptoeing around this issue. When he's ready to talk, and he will talk, I'm going to tell him exactly how I feel. I'm not going to yell. I'm not going to guilt trip. I'm just going to lay it all out. The dinners, the disrespect, the constant emotional tug-of-war between me and his mom. I'm going to ask him to go to couples therapy, even though he's always rolled his eyes at the idea. Because if we don't get outside help, I honestly don't think this pattern will ever change. I know he loves me. I don't doubt that. But love without respect, without effort, without balance, it's not enough. And I'm no longer willing to fight alone. If he refuses to see what's happening, if he keeps choosing her over us, then that's his decision. but I've made mine too. I will not spend the rest of my life feeling like a guest in my own relationship. I'm hopeful, in a cautious kind of way. Hopeful that he'll finally understand, that he'll see this not as an attack, but as a plea to save something worth saving. But if not, well, then I'll know I tried. And this time, I won't feel guilty for walking away.